Hello, my name is Andrea Porter. I'm Monona County Conservation's naturalist, and today I am going to talk to you about biodiversity. Um, in terms of biodiversity in many different forms, there's three on the planet. We're going to focus on biodiversity in ecosystems mostly. And so we're going to do a little bit of biomes first because biomes are important to know when we're talking about biodiversity. Okay, so the first one we have is the tundra, and the tundra is located way north of the equator, the north of Canada. And so the tundra in that area, it's going to be really cold, um, snowy. There's permafrost there. And if you don't know what permafrost is a layer of the earth that's permanently frozen. And then there's a top layer on top of that where your plants and animals live on top of the permafrost. So the next one is your taiga or boreal forest, and that is just below the tundra. It still gets really cold. You see snow there, and then you'll have all of the animal life in that biome that is adapted to living in that type of climate. So the next one is the temperate deciduous forest, and you see that in the next zone south of the taiga. And in the United States, you will see it in the Pacific Northwest as well as the northeastern parts of the United States. So then we have the desert, and the desert is located in the United States, where like Nevada is located. It's dry. It has very little rain that is recorded on a yearly basis, and those animals have adapted to dry and very little amounts of rain. So then we get into the savanna. The savanna that's in that picture is mostly in Africa, but we do have oak savannas here in this Midwest region on top of hilltops, and it's drier than below on the valley parts of the biome that we see here in Iowa. So here we have the tropical rainforest. The tropical rainforest is pretty close to the equator and the equator. So you're going to get the most biodiversity in terms of animal species, which we'll get into that a little bit later. And the animal species, there are a lot of different types of animals that live in the rainforest. It gets lots of rain, hence the word rainforest. And tropical means it has a lot of humidity. So there's quite a diverse amount of biomes within the planet. And the final biome is grasslands. Grasslands, where you will see them, is in the Midwest region of the United States. And we actually live in the grassland area biome. And later on, there'll be a short little project for you to do on your own on a grassland biome. So each biome has a different habitat. And what is a habitat? It is a place where an organism or a community or organisms live, including all living and non-living factors or conditions of the surrounding environment. So basically, it's the animals, the weather patterns, the trees, the rocks, everything that's living and non-living within that environment. So that is what a habitat is. So what biome do we live in? I kind of touched on that during our biome slide. And we live in the grassland prairie. And this is a typical picture of a prairie grassland. You do have the tall grass prairie and the short grass prairie. This particular prairie that we live in Iowa is considered the tall grass prairie. So we have the turkey foot or grass, which is the Indian grass in our prairie. And then we have multiple different types of grasses other than that one. We also have forbs. Look up the word forbs, Forbes, in terms of prairie plants. And then we also have the flowers, the native flowers that are meant to live on the prairie. There's some coneflower in that picture, blazing star, and some other things that I'm not quite certain on what they are, but those are a few things that I know right off the top of my head in that picture. Purple coneflower is another one that is a very common species of plant in the prairie. So if you want to research on your own about plants that you can find on the prairie, there's way more than I listed. Okay, so what kinds of habitats can be found within the prairie grassland biome? So there's quite a different amount of habitats to be found. So this one is a lake habitat. This one is particularly in Monona County. It is Blue Lake at Lewis and Clark State Park. This one is a picture of the uplands, and the uplands is the land that meets the Luss Hills, that transition zone. It's a pretty neat area to go and visit. We have ponds, the wetlands, and the oak savannas. So the oak savanna is dry. It characteristically has oak on the top of the hills and in the Luss Hills, and it's just a savanna because it's so dry in climate. So here is a slide for a biodiversity video. Unfortunately, I think the link does not work within the PowerPoint anymore. I had it working at one point, but my note to you is copy and paste it at the end of the slideshow so you can view it on your own. It will pop up on YouTube. I tried it. So what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the amount of plants, animals, soil types within an area. That's for the ecosystem or And so it's the variety of life in the world or in a particular habitat or ecosystem, um, where there are 3 areas that you can see biodiversity. You can see it on the genetic level when you look at the genetic strains and genetics. You can see it on the species level. Those are the 2 pictures in the middle, and the ecosystem level as well. So your marine ecosystem will have the biodiversity specific to the marine ecosystem. You have the woodlands ecosystem, and then you have biodiversity in the woodlands. You have biodiversity in the deserts, etc., etc. So, what are we talked about biodiversity a little bit and how you can determine biodiversity. Um, but with biodiversity, you also have to think about the habitat and what humans are doing to the earth, um, in the broad scheme of things. Um, so these pictures are representative of what forces are happening on the planet, to cause habitat degradation. So, degradation just means that at one point it was diverse and then humans came in, or human causes came in and caused the biodiversity to decrease and degrade the ecosystem within in the biome. So, in the upper right picture, we have a picture of a clear cut going on. If you notice, there's a lot of trees in the background of that picture. And then in the foreground, it's all flat. It's a little bumpy, but it definitely doesn't have trees in the forefront of it. So in the middle top is the representation of climate change, um, and the melting of polar ice caps. That's a picture of a polar bear and its cub. And in the background, you can see a little bit of an ice flow there, where there is ice and water that is flowing down behind them. So that is indicative of something that's going on this planet, and it's very real. The one on the left side on the top is an example of what we call um, a microburst or a mini tornado in a localized area. Um, it doesn't necessarily, it's not miles long, it's just a little spot where trees are toppled. And so locally, that biodiversity will decrease in that little zone, let's say, of the microburst. So the next picture below the microburst is a picture of a wildfire. Wildfire does temporarily degrade an area that it goes through. It will displace animals in that general location. It will cause the animals to vacate, and then the biodiversity in that exact area that the wildfire goes through decreases. So that's a factor on the planet. We have lots of wildfires that happen on a yearly basis. They're becoming worse as the global temperature rises, and it becomes a threat to the livelihood of humans if it's encroaching on a particular populated area. And then it also displaces the animals as well, like I said before. So the middle picture here on the bottom, it's everywhere. This is a local stream. It is localized in erosion, but all streams travel to bigger rivers, and then the bigger rivers turn into the ocean. So eventually, whether it's human caused erosion, animal caused erosion, or natural erosion, it silt particles actually can be traced all the way to the ocean. And silt particles within the water um, will end up choking out species of fish eggs, as well as causing not or sunlight to not come through, and so the riparian plants cannot grow in there. So the last picture on the slideshow with the 20-mile-per-hour sign and the garage back there and the power lines and the tree. What do you see around that? It's water that isn't supposed to be there. So it's flooding. So this area has seen a lot of damage to flooding in the last couple of years. And then as well as in 2011 was a giant year for flooding. So in 2011, there's a place that's nearby called Decatur Bend. I think if you live in this area, you probably know where that is. So we used to maintain that as a park. But in 2011, there was a lot of damage caused in that Decatur Bend area, and it silted in and brought a lot of sand and soil particles into that bend, and the fishing has been degraded because of that. So here's your time to do some exploration on your own based on some of the information that I gave you and some research that you might need to do outside of this slideshow. So obviously you're not going to split into partner groups because you're home. This was a slideshow presented to another group that was in school. So what you're going to do is take the upland prairie biome and research the biodiversity in each of its habitats. So I helped you understand what the habitats were in the prairie biome a few slides ago. Let's say you want to, for an example, do some research on the lake environment. Tell me everything you know about lakes, everything that you can gather from your research. This is meant for you solely for learning. It's up to your teacher if they want to give you participation credit for this project. I just don't know what your teacher prefers. So it's just designed for you to do some research on your own and make it as fun as possible. Okay, so so what you're going to research is habitat characteristics, animals that can be found, and any other research that you can find within that habitat in the grassland prairie ecosystem. Okay, so if you have questions about biodiversity or anything, here is my contact information. Right now, I am working from home 3 days a week, so your best bet to get a hold of me is probably emailing me at this point. And I'm more than happy to answer a question through email, or even if you want to, you can call the office and our secretary can get a hold of me. So when we reopen back from the closure, if you have not visited the Arboretum, I highly recommend you come and find it and see what we have to offer. We have some live animals, we have some displays. I'm often in the garden if you want to help me weed some garden areas. That's up to you, but we are located east of town between the orange storage buildings as you're headed toward Turin and the solar panels at WIPCO, the power company. So if you have any questions, contact me. I hope you're having a good time off. Thanks. Bye.